I want to thank you all for joining for today's episode of Glad You Asked. Hey, Mike. Good to see
Hello.
you. I love your mountain cabin. Looks great where you are.
Yeah, I can go there tropical at a click of a couple buttons. That's it.
Yeah, beautiful. And thanks, Hank and Mary, for joining also. So we are going to go ahead and jump in and get started. We've got some good topics for today. And it looks like we do have a couple more people jumping in. So maybe these topics are something that a lot of people are running into here. And so today we are going to be talking about protecting your commissions when we are dealing with new construction with builders. We are having a lot of agents that are reporting some trouble with builders and getting their commission. So we want to remind you of what your responsibility is when it comes to protecting your commission when you're dealing with builders and new construction. Another topic for today is no drafting or no blind ads. These are commission rules, and it doesn't hurt to get reminders, but especially the no drafting. You guys are not attorneys, and it's just a reminder that if there's something that's not in the contract that you need to capture for your clients, you should either have an attorney prepare some sort of addendum for them, or your client to write the addendum themselves, but you can't draft it for them. So we're going to talk about that a little more detail. No blind ads. When you run your advertising, there are policies and procedures you must follow. One of them being that you cannot run ads that do not have our company name or logo on them. So just a reminder there. And finally, our last topic today will be customer service to agents of cooperating firms. So we've talked about customer service to our clients before, but we're going to have a little bit of a discussion about what does it look like when we are communicating with agents from other firms. All right, so those are going to be our topics for today. And so the very first one, we have had several questions about this here in just the past couple of weeks regarding how do I protect my commission when I'm dealing with a builder or new construction. You would think in this market that the builders would be happy to pay your commissions. You're bringing them all these buyers. And yet what we're running into are several agents that are getting a lot of pushback from builders with regards to paying their compensation. So what can you do? How can you protect yourself and make sure that you will get the compensation that is due to you for the work that you've done connecting the buyers with the builders? All right, Mike, what do you think about that? I see you here. What is one way an agent can protect themselves when dealing with a builder in new construction?
Well, one thing is to, discuss it with your buyer just in case they need to pay you, right? That could be in your buyer, should be in your buyer agency agreement with your buyer. If a builder just flat out refuses to pay you anything, then one way that you could do it is ask them to add that amount to the purchase price and make sure that your buyer understands that that's the case as well.
Okay, so that is one good way to handle it as far as making sure that the buyer is aware that they may have to pay the compensation if the builder will not. Now, the key to having that conversation is making sure that these conversations are had up front. You should not be trying to figure out if you're going to get commission or not days before closing. This is something that would need to be addressed from the very beginning, before the time of contract. So just a reminder, when we're talking about agency, especially buyer agency, and you getting your compensation, you have to educate your buyer on how that process works, especially with builders. And the point being that there are builders who will not compensate agents if you are not what they call the procuring cause. Okay. And so again, the time to figure out how your compensation is coming or when or where is not days before closing. That would have needed to have been addressed at the time of contract or even prior to that. So again, for protecting yourselves, education is key. Educate your buyers. If they're thinking about new construction, make sure they know if they visit a builder without you, that they must provide your information as their agent, or the builder may not compensate you if they decide to come back later. And so that's some of the issues that we're running into here, is buyers who have gone to builders and then later come back to an agent that they were talking to and said, oh, okay, I think I found a builder I like. I want to move forward now. Well, that builder won't pay because they don't consider that agent to be procuring cause. And so now, because you did not educate and prepare your buyer ahead of time, now it creates them having to be responsible for your compensation, and or, as Mike mentioned, potentially adding on additional cost to the price of the property. And so again, you have to be well versed yourself on buyer agency, and especially how it pertains to new construction. You need to be well versed on it, and you need to be able to explain that to your buyer clients who are thinking about building. All right, so what do you do if you didn't address it up front? If you don't have documentation that indicates how you're going to be paid or who you're going to be paid from concerning new construction, what do you do now? What do you do if you're 2-3 days before closing and you realize that there might be a problem, or the CD doesn't have your commission on it? What do you do now? Mike, I see a smile. What are you thinking?
I'm curious to see what you suggest here, because that's a very, very sticky situation. I mean, if your buyer agency agreement states that you're going to be paid 3%, I mean, technically your buyer is responsible for that. I'd like to hear some other thoughts on it, though.
Okay, well, I'll be happy to share some thoughts, but I'm curious of what a couple other people think, or have you run into this challenge or this situation, and how did you handle it?
Hey,
Hey, Hank.
interesting point. I have not had this issue, but it's good that we're talking about it, because I have heard it being brought up a few times in the office. In the
Okay.
buyer agreement, I do have it specified in that, what is it, on page one or page two? On the buyer agreement, 3% for if it's a for sale by owner, or if it's a builder, that the buyer is responsible for that if I'm not getting paid by either of those two parties. So I'll spell it out in the very beginning and explain to them. Plus, I give my buyers several business cards, especially if they are interested in new construction. So they have that in their possession, they have it in their purse or their wallet. And I do tell them, whenever they approach a builder, or whenever they go on to an on-site development agent, to let them know upfront, as soon as you make that first initial contact, hand them my card and say, this is my agent. So they're well aware. And in some cases, there is a book that you would sign when you're visiting with a builder or an on-site development, where that information can be registered. But in the very beginning, whoever I'm working with, I make sure that it's clear on that buyer agreement. If it's not, then it's my fault. And there's no way I can go back to my clients and say, hey, I didn't explain this to you. We need to add to the price. I need to get paid because I feel like I'm doing a disservice to my clients by not explaining this in the very beginning. So try to make it as clear as I can at the very get-go how this works, the process works, and it's in writing. And so when they sign it, they do know that if the builder doesn't want to pay, I will be looking to them for payment.
Right. But they should know that at the time of contract, not days before closing, right?
Correct. Well, at the time I'm doing the buyer agreement with them, working with them in the very beginning, how that works. Yes.
Mhm. All right. Well, thank you, Hank, and thanks for sharing those thoughts about how you do it. Those are great ideas for other agents to include in their buyer consultation. I like what you said about having it specific about the difference between compensation from FSBOs and builders to really highlight that it could be different depending on the type of property that that buyer's looking for. So that's a great idea. Jen, I see you nodding. Do you have something to add? Oh, I can't hear you. Are you muted? Well, no, your mute's not on. Oh. Nope, still can't hear you. Okay, I might need you to type a little something in the chat box for me. So while Jen is typing, again, thank you to Hank for sharing those ideas. And he brought up a really good point. So you have to explain it to your client. And this conversation needs to be had before an offer is made so that your client has full expectation of what is going to be their responsibility when it comes to your commission. If you have not explained it well, if they enter into an offer and they are thinking that your compensation is paid by the builder and they find out days before closing that they in fact would be responsible for it, that's a little bit too late. I mean, they already have lending in place or whatever their plans are, and it's not the right time to introduce to that buyer client that they may have an additional responsibility of an additional 3 or 2.5 or whatever your agreement is percent on top of their closing. So when it comes to your compensation and your commission, you are responsible for making sure that it's very clear how you're going to get paid before or by the time that your client enters into their contract. Okay, that's really important for you to know. If you did not handle that responsibility, you can't try to cancel the contract or otherwise interfere, because that contract is between the buyer and the builder. And you are actually not a party to the contract as far as the actual construction of the property. Okay. And so again, it is your responsibility to look out for your compensation. And that conversation needs to be had up front, and it needs to be addressed again at no later than the time of contract. All right. So what do you do? If you are days before closing and you realize the builder's not going to pay your compensation, do you try to interfere? Do you try to force the buyer to pay? What do you do? And so the question there, the way to answer that question is to determine if you have any kind of paperwork, writing, something in writing from the builder that has acknowledged that you are going to receive some compensation from the transaction. So you have to start there looking for your paper trail. Ideally, you would have some sort of agreement in writing and signed. But otherwise, you would need to pursue that compensation. If you were expecting it from the builder, you'll have to pursue that separately from the builder. Again, it is not a part of the transaction between the buyer and the builder. You cannot interfere. You cannot try to stop that closing. So it's important for you to understand what your responsibility is and what your limits are when it comes to that compensation. So that will have to be offline and separate if you did not handle it appropriately from the beginning. Okay. Now, the reason that we have you to understand what the process is and the reason the buyer agency agreement is written the way it is is because builders will try not to compensate you if you're not procuring cause. This is something that you've been warned about from pre-licensing to post to continuing education. We've had some discussions over the years. This is nothing new. And so I'm not trying to say that it's your fault if you don't get paid, but what we're saying is that there are many opportunities for you to address it. And if you fail to address it appropriately, there might be the chance that you won't get the compensation that you're entitled to. Okay. It is too late to try to address it with that buyer days before closing. That has to happen no later than the time of contract. Okay. Now, with that being said, sure, you have a buyer agency agreement. Oh, Jen, I can hear you now. You want to jump in and tell me your thoughts from earlier?
I'm like, all of a sudden my sound works. What? I don't know. I'm having tech issues over here. No, I was nodding because I found Hank's process to make a lot of sense. I actually don't include the builder, and I thought, okay, that's something I need to include. I always do have that conversation ahead of time, and I make sure it's in writing, and yet not on my buyer agreement. So I thought that was interesting. And then I just, I put in the chat that I find that in all aspects, the more clear you are up front, the less issues you're going to have throughout that transaction. It doesn't mean you won't have to repeat those things that you say at the front, but the more, as long as everybody understands everything from the front, you can go back and go, remember, we talked about that. When the difficult conversations come up, you remember, we talked about what we're going to do if this happens and if that happens. So, but yeah, I like Hank's processes, and I'm going to steal it.
Okay, well, good. Thanks again, Hank. And so, and I do hope that some of our other agents will take those ideas and implement them during their buyer consultation as well. I think those are great ideas. And so for the agents, I got a call recently from an agent, and she was saying, well, I helped my client with purchasing the land, but what about my compensation for helping them with the builder, the construction? Are those two different transactions, or am I going to get my compensation from both? That's a really good question, and not for 2 days before the closing. That's a question that needs to be addressed from the beginning, from the outset. What is the expectation? Because you, the agent, would expect to get compensation from the land and from the construction. The builder side, they may be expecting to compensate you for the land, but not the construction, or maybe at a different rate for referring them for construction. And so again, you cannot leave it to chance. These things need to be addressed upfront from the beginning. And if you fail to do so and realize that days before closing, again, you're going to have to look back through your paper trail, find out what was agreed to, what documentation do you have to potentially stand on, because you're going to have to pursue that with the builder, not with your buyer client day before closing. Okay. Tara, I see you pop up. Did you have a question or something you'd like to add? Okay. Hey, Tara, hold on just one moment. I see you talking and I can hear something, but on my screen, it's not coming through clearly. So I was just trying to see if there's an adjustment I can make on my end. Okay, can you try again? Better? Yeah, that's much better.
There we go. My headphones were trying to connect.
Okay.
So I have a scenario like this because I'm helping the client find the land for the builder. So now she is my client. We have a buyer agency agreement, all that jazz. And my question is, and I don't know if you already answered it, but does part of the commission from the builder go towards you guys as far as our cap, like our percentage?
Oh, okay. That's a good question. So all of the compensation that comes into the firm is going to be subject to the cap if it is over the minimum amount. So we do have minimums, and I think those minimums are, I want to say it's like $350 if it's like something with referring a tenant for property management, and I think it might be $500 if it's a land deal. But I can double check. They're in the policies and procedures. So there are limits.
I can look in there. That's fine.
Okay, but yeah, so there are limits if they're smaller deals. But
Mhm.
again, if you are helping and working with the builder to help find land, then there is also the opportunity for you to get some sort of compensation on the construction. So again, make sure that
Correct.
those two separate opportunities for compensation are addressed and you have a
Mhm.
clear understanding up front. Okay.
Yeah, from this particular builder, if I found the client and referred them, I get a percentage of the home, but I also get a percentage from the land. They give me, they give a base pay of $1,500 to everybody that
Mhm.
finds the land for them, plus I get the commission from the actual land purchase. I was wondering, from the 1,500 that they give us for helping them, that still goes through Keller Williams and goes towards CAP, correct?
Correct.
Okay,
That is correct.
that's all I wanted to verify.
Okay, but thank you for bringing that. That's a really good, because here's the thing, all builders are different and their compensation structures are different. Just because it's working this way with that builder doesn't mean it's going to work that way with another builder. So I thank you for bringing that whole scenario up. And yes, that compensation would be subject to your splits. So thanks for asking that. And now, so again, that question, that lingering question, what do you do if you're days before closing? We've talked about what not to do. You can't try to interrupt the transaction. You can't try to change your buyer's financing and all of those things. So what you have to do is you're going to have to figure out if there's a way to get some sort of confirmation from the builder of compensation, and or you're going to have discussions with that buyer about how it can be handled at this point. But again, you're a little bit late in the game. You have to handle these compensation and commission discussions from the very beginning. Okay. So there's a chance, though, that you might be out of a commission if the buyer can't afford it and didn't include it in their numbers when they were entering into the contract. And if the builder won't pay it, where does that leave you? That leaves you with an expensive lesson that you learned there. And hopefully not to do that again, as far as failing to address that compensation up front. Okay. And so, Mike, did you have a question? I see you pop up.
That's not what we wanted to hear, Tiffany. Come on now.
I know. I know that. I understand that's not what you want to hear, but here's the thing. You have just as much responsibility in protecting your compensation and having those discussions timely. Okay. The real estate commission is not going to jump in and support you and defend your right to compensation. They don't even handle claims and arbitration and things like that. So it's up to you to make sure that you understand the process and that you protect your compensation. I know that's a tough lesson, Mike.
Could be an expensive one, depending on the price point, right? And you probably did a lot of work for nothing. But fortunately, that's never happened to me. Knock on wood.
I like how you're knocking on that wood, right? Yeah. So when we're talking about, these are expensive lessons. And that's why we want to have these kinds of conversations. We rather you not learn it by losing out on compensation that you expected, or perhaps were even banking or budgeting on. And so you do need to know what your responsibility is when it comes to making sure that your commission is properly accounted and arranged for. Mary, I saw you pop in. Do you have a question or comment? You're on mute. Can you unmute for me?
Okay, there we go.
Okay.
I don't have a question so far. I missed what you were just talking with Mike, but I may come up with a question yet.
Okay. Oh, that's fine. I thought you were popping in because you had something to add to the conversation.
No.
Okay. Well, thanks for joining us. And so, Mike, again, thank you for bringing that up. And it might not be what you want to hear, but it's the reality of getting yourself into contracts where you have not addressed your right to compensation from the beginning. And so, again, we can give you some thoughts, we can give you some ideas on how to address it and what to do. But if you wait till the day before closing, there may be nothing that can be done to address your compensation that quickly. And so again, there could be some follow-up activity after closing between yourself and the builder if there was a lapse in communication. But if you don't have any kind of written documentation, if you have no indication that the builder was going to compensate you at some point, you may not have a leg to stand on. And so that's the sad reality of failing to address your compensation in new construction from the very beginning. Okay, so again, we want to warn you because these stories don't always have a happy ending. Again, sometimes they're very expensive lessons, and we don't want you guys to learn those lessons the hard way. All right. All right. Any other questions about that? All right, well, on to topic number 2. Topic number 2 is reminders from the Real Estate Commission rules. The Real Estate Commission has a lot of rules, you guys. I was just in an all-day training on Tuesday where they were rehashing over a bunch of rules, like the one that they just changed in July, that all compensation has to come through the firm before it can be paid to the agents. Hopefully you're all aware. We tried to make sure that came out very clearly in July. But 2 rules that we found out recently need a little bit of refreshing for some of our agents are the no drafting and the no blind ads. Okay, so again, no drafting means if you are not an attorney, if you don't have an attorney license to practice law in real estate in North Carolina, then you cannot draft addendums to contracts. You cannot draft additional terms to add into. There's no drafting permitted unless you are a party to the contract. So if you're the buyer or the seller, then you can draft. If you are the agent representing a buyer or seller, there's no opportunity for you to create any kind of wording to add to a contract. Okay, so just want to hammer that one home. You all would have to either have your client have an attorney to create an addendum to meet their additional needs, or your clients themselves can draft addenda, but you want to warn against that because they may not think of all the legal implications of that. Okay, Mike.
Yes. So does that include buyer agency agreements and listing agreements? Because we have an additional terms area.
Right. Okay, thank you for asking that. Buyer agency agreements and listing agreements are employment agreements. So they're not contracts to transfer property. So thank you for asking. So that clarification for employment agreements, you can write whatever terms that are necessary for buyer to work with the firm or a seller to work with the firm. So the rule that we're talking about, thanks Mike for clarification here, is for contracts that transfer property. Contracts that transfer property. Okay, and Tara, I saw you had a question in the chat, so let me just peek at the chat really quick and see what it was.
Just can you give a scenario on how this happens and how that's wrong?
Okay, sure.
Only because I haven't done one, so
Okay.
I just like to know that I won't do it wrong.
Absolutely.
Because I hear people adding addendums to contracts. So as an agent, are we not allowed to write the information into it? Is that what you're stating?
Okay, excellent question, and thank you for asking. So there are plenty of pre-printed addenda that already exist that you can fill in the blanks and add to the contract. So we're not talking about those. We're talking about addenda where there is some other term or condition that buyer or seller want, and there's not a pre-printed addenda that already addresses it. And so if there's something else that buyer and seller want to define in their transaction or want to agree on, you cannot write up a quick little blurb and say buyer and seller also agree to add this XYZ. An easy example would be if there's personal property, if there's going to be an additional bill of sale that will be attached to the contract, maybe they're going to also include the pool table. You don't write that addendum up. If they want to include the pool table, now that one's pretty simple. Maybe buyer or seller can draft their additional item and have the other party sign. But if there's something like an if then or something where both parties have to do some sort of performance, then an attorney should be consulted to make sure that it's written properly.
So like if something doesn't perk or something of that nature on the contract, would
Okay.
that be the
Yeah,
scenario?
so there is an addendum that deals with like who pays for the testing when it comes to perk, but
Okay.
there's not one that determines what happens if it doesn't. And so if that happens and buyer and seller come to some sort of agreement and they want to capture that in writing, you cannot write that up. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Thank you for asking. That's a great, great questions. And thanks for digging deep to make sure we get good understanding. So again, when it comes to these addenda, if there is not something that already exists, there's tons of addenda already out there. But if there's something that does not exist that meets the need of your clients, they can, if they choose, write their own and have a signature between buyer and seller, and or we should always recommend that they have an attorney to draft it or at least review it before they sign and attach it to the contract. And one other thing to keep in mind, the addenda may need to be reviewed or considered by the lender. It might be something that the lender might have a concern about, depending on whatever this agreement is and how it impacts the transaction financially. All right. All right. Well, thank you guys for your participation in that topic. The next one is no blind ads. Does anybody know what the commission means when they say no blind ads?
Not including the firm name?
Very good. Thank you, Tara. It's pretty simple. All the commission requires is that you have either your firm name or at least the logo. You have to have some indication that your ad is from a professional. Okay. And so it's pretty straightforward. There must be at the very least a KW on any ad that you run that includes a property that you are listing or helping someone to transfer in some way. Now, a really good question that came up from an agent recently was, do I have to put my company name or firm name if I'm running a Facebook Live and just talking about real estate? I'm not actually advertising a property for anyone. I'm just, having a little conversation about a real estate tip. Do I have to put my company name on there? Okay, from the commission standpoint, that advertising rule is regarding advertising property for others. Okay, so that was a great question. But my question to you in response to that is, why wouldn't you put your company name on there? Like if you're trying to advertise or market yourself, wouldn't you want someone to know what company you're with and how to find you? And so, that was Jen, you look like you wanted to pop in. What do you got?
I'm just saying, if you're with the #1 real estate company in the world, yeah, no brainer. That's why you're here.
Yeah, very good. So, and Tara, you asked another really good and very common question. Does the hashtag count for the KW. Now, the commission doesn't really have a stance on that. Their stance is there must be some sort of indication of your company name in your advertisement. But we, as a company, have decided that we want to see the KW, the logo, or Keller Williams in the ad, not just the hashtag. So each firm is able to create more restrictions regarding advertising because we're responsible for all advertising of all of our agents. And so we do have a stricter rule regarding that. And thank you again so much for asking. Those are great questions. Great questions. All right, so just those reminders and refreshers. When it comes to the advertising rule, it is so important for you to understand the commission rule because you are liable per the commission for your advertising and for following the rule, as well as your firm. So if you don't advertise, both you and the firm are going to be held liable if you don't advertise per commission rule. And so we want to make sure you understand what those rules are, what you're liable for, because if there is an ad that's submitted to the commission and it doesn't meet the requirement, they're not just going to come after the firm. They will pursue you individually as a licensee as well. And so we want to protect both the firm and all of you with proper education when it comes to these commission rules. Any questions? Any more questions about advertising?
Just a comment.
Sure, Mike.
It's also a violation of the Realtor Code of Ethics.
To not have your company.
Yep.
Yep.
Blind ads are against the Realtor Code of Ethics. So you could be brought up to before the Professional Standards Committee and have a letter put in your file. So
yes,
I mean, there's some pretty strict things about blind ads.
Okay. Mike, thank you so much for bringing that one up too. So not only can you get in trouble with the real estate commission and your firm, but now also a reminder, you can get in trouble with your realtor association as well. So it's a very serious matter, and it's as simple as putting a KW or the logo or any kind of indicator that you are a professional, and making sure that your ad does not look like it's just a regular buyer or seller trying to sell their own property. Tara.
Just one more question. So
Sure.
in the text, does it have to state Keller Williams Central, or is just the logo on the picture ad suffice?
Even just the logo on the picture is sufficient.
Okay.
That meets that minimum criteria for the commission.
Perfect. All right. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you so much. All right. Okay. Well, that was the commission refresher. Again, the commission has tons of rules, and we really try to capture most of those in our policies and procedures. We were recently notified that there was one that we missed in the PMP, and I think it's just because we just expected that this was so ingrained in all of you that we didn't even include it. But it came to our attention that we were missing the record retention for 3-year rule in the policies and procedures. So when it rolls out, the updated one in January, you will see that refresher and reminder. But the commission does require you to retain all records for 3 years from the last date that anything that had to do with the transaction took place. All right, so that's just a refresher reminder. You'll see those in the January release of the PNP. All right, last topic, and then I'm opening it up to you guys for whatever you've got. Customer service. Now, we've talked about in a previous, glad you asked, customer service between you and your client. Today, it's going to be customer service between you and agents of cooperating firms. You guys have been bad little girls and boys. You're not being nice. Okay, so let's talk about what's happening and what is expected. So when it comes to customer service, there's a minimum level of service that is expected between you and your clients, a minimum level of professionalism. But it's not just between you and your clients, it's between you and all parties to the transaction. So not just you, your clients, or even the other agents. There are some real estate brokers that have been very nasty, very not nice to attorneys, to lenders, to other party professionals that are a part of the transaction. And so this is a reminder that you need to be professional and you need to be accessible and you need to communicate well with all parties to the transaction. Okay, so while the real estate commission rules may not have a standard for your professionalism between anyone other than your client, the realtor code of ethics does. And as Mike mentioned before, so if you are a realtor, which if you are in this firm, you must be, you do have a code of professionalism between agent to agent and other professionals that you have also agreed to abide by. And so what that means is if there is a conflict, if there's some sort of disagreement, you can't act like third graders. You guys do have to act like adults and you have to communicate. And if you realize that maybe you're not able to communicate effectively in the situation, perhaps your emotions are running high, that might not be the time to address or respond to it. Feel free to reach out. That's what we have other people that can assist, talk to other agents, blow that steam off first before you respond. Send us an email to the broker in charge 832 email and let us know what's going on to give you some guidance before you respond in an unprofessional manner. And who can tell me what you think is an unprofessional manner to respond to other agents or to other service providers? What do you think some people have been doing?
Typing in all caps.
Typing in all caps. Okay. What else?
Just not responding at all.
What was that, Paul?
Not responding at all to calls.
Okay. Yes. Not responding. Just no response. Completely ignoring people that need a response, right? What else have agents been doing?
I would say casting blame, like pointing fingers and calling people out that they're doing things on purpose, possibly.
Okay, casting blame, throwing people under buses. Have you ever heard that term? And even worse, Mike, what do you think? What else are these agents up to?
Profanity.
Cussing people out.
Cussing people out and profanity. Is there ever a place for that in professionalism? Okay, thank you.
I was about to say a bar, but you said professionalism.
Yeah. There. Okay. If I just left it at if there's ever a place for that. Okay. But the point here, you guys, and even worse, there have been some agents that have even threatened. And you're really taking it to a whole nother level when you're issuing threats. Okay. And so yeah, I see you're shocked. I'm so glad that all of you look shocked about that, and not shocked in a bad way, I hope. But yes, there is a certain level of a minimum level of professionalism, and you cannot allow your emotions to take over and cause you to do things that are unprofessional, because not only do you look bad when you do these unprofessional things, but you also make who else look bad? Okay, the firm. And who else?
All realtors.
Oh, okay, all realtors. And who else?
The real estate community.
Okay, and who else?
The people who are the fiduciary to our clients.
Your clients. So you make everybody look bad. When you do this one crazy thing, you are a reflection on, depending on who you're doing it to. Let's say that you're cussing out a lender. That is a poor reflection on all realtors, on your firm. And how do you think that lender is going to feel about your client's file if you are acting in such an unprofessional way towards that lender? Because that lender can very easily just pop it on the bottom of their list. There are things that you could do that could negatively impact the person who has hired you to look out for their best interest. Okay. And so when we talk about this professionalism, we need to remind you, and I'm sure it's none of you that are here in this, glad you asked. We're so glad that you're here. But if it is you, it's just a reminder that a minimum level of professionalism is required across the board. You can't be all sweet sugar cubes with your clients and then have horns pop up when you're dealing with other agents or other professionals. Okay. There's a basic standard of professionalism. There should be no profanity. We shouldn't even have to tell you that when you are a part of a real estate transaction and operating in a professional capacity. You can say whatever you want in the shower or the bar, Tara, whatever, if you so feel led. But in your real estate transaction, there's just no place for that. There's no place for profanity. There's never a place for threats. And then again, a lot of times, even the things that you say that might not be profane could still be taken the wrong way, depending on who you're communicating with. And a lot of that has to do with what we call unconscious biases. So the Real Estate Commission is really cracking down on helping you to be more aware of yourself and your own biases and how something you say may be taken from someone else, someone of a different culture or someone of a different background. And so there could be things that you thought were perfectly fine, but they were received differently from someone of a different background. So these are things that you have to keep in mind and be aware of. Okay. And if that was you, if you're one of the people that has threatened someone, or if you're one of the people who has used profanity with an agent, or if you're ignoring people that need or deserve a response because of their role in the transaction, I want you to put your hand up and smack it. Bad, bad, bad. Stop it. Stop doing that. Keep in mind that, again, you need a minimum level of professionalism. Okay. And thank you again. I'm sure this doesn't even apply to any of the folks that are on this call. But thank you for allowing the conversation and being a part of it. And I hope that you'll get the word out and tell some of your lovely coworkers to tune in on this one. Check it out when it's on the YouTube channel and hear because these are really important topics and the information needs to get out. All right. Well, thank you guys for being a part of it. Now we still have about 15 minutes. Does anyone have any questions for me? Have you brought anything that is happening in a deal or transaction, something you ran into lately that you would like to ask or have addressed?
No, I just want to thank you that you brought up the builder part of it, because it's just so naturally that I am dealing with one. So that's just, I really thank you for that information, because that does help moving forward. Especially now knowing all commissions go through the firm, no matter how big or small. Well, other than the limit per se, but I am going to be looking through the policies and procedures. And you did say in the team meeting that they'll be updated next month.
January.
Yep. Okay.
Yep. Early January, we'll have the latest update, but they're out there right now on the intranet. And so there are some limits for small commissions, because we don't want to, there's not going to be a split if the commission is like 300 or 350 or something like that. So there is a limit there for what makes sense from a kind of a break-even standpoint. Yeah. So thank you so much for asking. And thank you all for coming. Any other questions? Any topics, concerns?
So, Teresa, you had mentioned early, first thing in the call about the North Carolina Real Estate Commission backing away from allowing us to be paid at closing on a DA.
Mm-hmm.
Was there any? Did they tell you why? I guess. What has happened there to cause that to happen?
Okay, Mike, thanks for asking that question. They actually did talk a little bit about the why behind it. And a lot of it has come from attorneys having concerns about their liability for being responsible for making sure that if they pay an agent, that they are actively licensed at the time of the compensation, or that they have the proper firm licensure. So there's some liability outside of the firm that the attorneys take on when they issue compensation other than directly to a firm. So that was an issue. Again, agent behavior, and how you guys would be shocked at the stories that we're hearing about how agents are addressing and treating attorneys. I can't imagine some of the conversations and some of the things that have been said. And they're making demands. We can't make demands of attorneys concerning anything with regards to compensation. And so the attorneys have been pushing back and putting a lot of pressure on the real estate commission to get the real estate brokers in check, because they really had gotten themselves a bit out of line, if you will. The other thing is that the real estate commission has the onus of making sure that the agents and the firm entities within a firm are double checked by the firms. And if the people are being paid in a different manner, or directly from the attorney or from their clients, then the firm may not have a firm hold on what their actual status is, and if they're even eligible to receive compensation under whatever entity that they're operating on. So it's kind of a checks and balance because of the requirements that the commission has of firms. So it's really a stair step of several things that have prompted them to make the rule. It used to just be that provisional brokers were subject to this, and now they've made it for all brokers. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I kind of figured the last one that you mentioned, the last reason, was one that I kind of thought of. I'd never thought about that liability on the attorney, which it makes sense.
Yeah.
And then one comment, I had a one-on-one coaching meeting today, and this particular agent was thinking that they were not going to pay their BACAR dues that are due for the end of the month, or mid-January. Confused with that being the MLS dues. We may want to make sure that everybody understands that is the realtor dues, not MLS.
Okay, thank you for providing that. We can send a clarification. I will tell you, we have been trying to figure out what is the best way to help people know the difference, because our firm is a member of multiple boards and multiple MLSs. And so it can get a little bit confusing about the rules of this board versus this MLS, and that the entities are all very different. So maybe we'll put together a breakdown to explain that in more detail. So thank you for that. We'll make sure to definitely send out a clarification on the difference between BACAR and the AMLS. Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions, concerns, feedback, smart remarks? I got that from Kizzy. All right. Well, I want to just thank you all for attending, and thanks so much for your participation. This is the last Glad You Asked for this year. The next one would have been on December 30th, but that is actually a holiday. The office is going to be closed, in case you didn't know. And so we hope that you all will enjoy your time off and have a blessed and happy holiday. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and come back with your guns blazing and smoking and ready to do some business in January. And so our next Glad You Asked is going to be on January the 13th. So go ahead and mark your calendars, and we're going to have some good stuff ready for you at the beginning of the new year. All right. Thank you all again.
Thanks, Tiffany.
So glad.
Merry Christmas to you as well.
Thank you. Merry Christmas. Bye, everyone.